I'm Tim Sanders, author of the book Love is the Killer App, How to Win Business and Influence Friends. And today I am on the Dov Baron Leadership and Loyalty Show, where we are going to break down mentorship and make it not only important and accessible to you, we're going to help you undo the myths that keep you from being the greatest leader you can possibly be.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us here on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty Leadership Interview Series, where today we're going to look at why we all need mentors, and in the pursuit of not only success, but also fulfillment, why you may need to consider what it means to mentor others. If you're a new listener, a new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, we're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, and I want to send you a big thank you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We're honored and grateful that Inc. magazine cited us as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader, and GNA cited us in the top 10 podcasts for HR pros and employers. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please take yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Watching and listening to this show, you are likely a high-level executive, an entrepreneur, a sales leader, or a leader in some capacity. And as a leader, you know that we all stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before us. We know that the work, the insights, the courage that others has become the very foundation for the path that we walk on. And yet so many of today's leaders fail to recognize that they too must pave the way for the next generation of leaders. Our guest today is Tim Sanders. Tim spent most of his early career on the cutting edge of innovation and change. He was an early stage member of Mark Cuban's Broadcast.com, which had the largest opening day of IPO in history. After Yahoo acquired the company, Tim was tapped to lead their ValueLab, and by 2001 he rose to become the Chief Solutions Officer. In 2005, he founded Deeper Media, which provides consulting services to leading brands. Today is one of the top-rated speakers on the leadership circuit. Tim has been the author of 4 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Love is the Killer App, How to Win Business and Influence Friends. Right there it is, fabulous book. It's been translated into over a dozen languages, and has been featured in Fast Company, USA Today, New York Times, the Boston Globe, Christian Science Monitor, and on CNN. However, today he is here to geek out with me as a fellow traveler on this path of life, and for those who choose what we like to call a hero's journey. So please, put your hands together and welcome Mr. Tim Sanders. Crowd goes wild, Tim. Woo! Good to have you here, mate.
Hey, good to be with you, Dov.
I'm really looking forward to this. As I said, we're here to geek out together because you and I spent some time before we were on air. You know, I've said in the intro that you're a New York Times bestselling author. You've been a corporate executive for an organization that Yahoo bought for $5.7 million. You've been a brand guy to some of the top names. It seems like a long way from there to speaking on sales and leadership and then writing a book about love. Tell us about that part of the journey.
I mean, I got to say, dude, I was always raised to love first and ask questions later, and that included my professional life. Dude, I was just one of those people that found a way to really like and care about and develop an emotional attachment with everyone I work with, customers, associates. It was in my DNA. But like for the first 15 years of my career, every one of my managers tried to beat that out of me. They felt like nice people got ran over, and it never occurred to me that, you know, what I really needed to do was improve my technique. And then in 1997, I went to work for a guy named Mark Cuban. He had a startup called AudioNet. Later, it became broadcast.com for the IPO. He had a motto at his little warehouse company that I joined, and it went like this: make love, not war. I was like a free-range chicken in that culture. In other words, he said the secret to being successful is to really care and to act upon that caring and to figure out also how to make sure you're getting a check and you're running a strong business while you do that. So that's when I began to focus all of my efforts on the technique of being a giver, the technique of being a mentor, the technique of being a super connector. And that's really where the book Love is the Killer app came from, was that working culture and the opportunity of the World Wide Web's explosion.
But it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, because certainly for those of us who are over 50, and that's me for sure.
That's me too. I'm this many.
Right. So, you know, we were told that those two things were mutually exclusive. That your personal life and your professional life were mutually exclusive. That loving and caring about people versus being profitable were mutually exclusive. At work, you had to be ruthless, whereas at home, you know, and I remember hearing that and thinking what complete horseshit it was for me. It just didn't wash for me. And I always had this analogy, which was thrown at me by one of my business teachers years ago, who I really didn't like and didn't get along with very well, who used the analogy of Adolf Hitler and said, you know, Adolf Hitler was a vegetarian who loved his dog, but it didn't stop him being brutal at his job. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm not really looking to be Adolf Hitler. And he said, no, it's just about understanding that separation. And many years ago, I read M. Scott Peck's The Road Less Traveled, which I know you know. Amazing book, marvelous book. Peck, who was a military psychiatrist, so about as rigid as you could get, said in that book that if he didn't love his patients, if he didn't love the people he was taking care of, he was of no service to them. And for me, that transformed me. That was like permission for what I knew in my heart and my soul. So it's like that same match here.
You know, I love that point. And frequently I make the same point talking to friends. I say, listen, you can't lead people you don't love because they know, right? The old generation, the selfish generation, the me generation, we wanted to be respected. We wanted to develop a legacy, right? Not the world we live in today. Today, we want to belong. We want to achieve meaning, find it in our life, right? So there's been a big shift. But I'll tell you the thing. The reason Mark Cuban had no problem with saying make love, no, not war, the reason that I don't have a problem with making investments with people and not expecting anything, is about confidence, right? And it's about the idea that you're bigger than your ego. And it is absolutely okay if you really help someone, if you really develop an emotional bond with someone and they leave you. It's okay if they copy you. I call them progeny, right? I decided a long time ago to take that abundance mentality. Really, Dov, I think the idea of bringing love to work is about overcoming your fear of looking stupid. And I don't care. I've looked stupid most of my life, all right? I was in special education from the 2nd to the 5th grade. My name was Short Bus at church till the 7th grade. I have no problem with people making fun of me, and I guess that's what freed me up to develop this perspective.
That's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. You know, I am a great believer in that the blessing is the curse and the curse is the blessing. It's just a matter of mentality. And I don't say that, and I know that kind of stuff is thrown around as cliche and it pisses me off. But what I mean by it is I don't think that the curse is seen as a blessing in the moment. Right. It's usually with a little bit of perspective, which is a good look back, but initially it can feel pretty awful. And I think it's easy to also get caught in something feeling like it's this great gift and a blessing, which may become a curse later on. You and I have this this natural affinity together. The thing that we're both big fans of is mythology, and particularly in my case, the work of Joseph Campbell, which influenced me a lot. Mythology influenced me a lot as a kid because I, like you, was challenged at school. I was severely dyslexic, but had a love of mythology. Love. I mean, there was this one class. It wasn't all the time. It was only every now and then, and they talk about Greek mythology, and I would be just, I just loved that stuff. I loved the ideas of the messages and the metaphor of what it was teaching us. Brilliantly done. What was the pull for you? What got you to look at mythology and even the work of Campbell. What got you to that? Because we've got business, we've got special education, we've got short bus.
Yeah, you got it.
And then we've got broadcast.com and billions of dollars.
So for me personally, I started out in a very strict Christian home, didn't have a lot of access to anything about mythology growing up in my little West Texas, Eastern New Mexico community. Got a scholarship to go to Loyola Marymount, studied world religions so I wouldn't have to take so many Catholicism classes. And in that context was exposed to Greek mythology. And I'm telling you, it occurred to me within 5 minutes that Greek mythology was the underpinning, the coding, the operating system for all the words we use, all the analogies that we employ, all the metaphors that move us. And I don't want to freak people out, but every great work, every great story is based somewhere in Greek mythology, from Homer's Odyssey to Star Wars to various religious documents. I have to be careful when I say that, right? But it is the coding by which we understand things. Everything from Latin moving forwards based on it. So it's like, for me, it was like studying computer science for etymology, which is my particular geekdom, the meaning of words and how they're coded into our psyche. So it was like studying computer science for me once I figured that out.
Yeah, it was for me, I've spoken about this in some of the interviews where I've been interviewed. And people say, what is it about you? And I said, for me, I grew up in this really extreme poverty and an environment that was violence and crime and all kinds of things that were around me. And as a kid, I can remember clearly being 7, 8, 9 years old, looking at my mother, looking at my aunt, looking at my uncle, looking at the people around me, noticing they wwere doing the same stupid shit over and over again. I mean, it was like, my aunt would get a new boyfriend and it's like, oh, she was really excited. And at 9, I could work out, this is the same guy with a new face. And I was fascinated by that. And that was, of course, what led me into understanding and deeply studying psychology. But when I came across mythology and even the deep metaphysical studies that led me into quantum physics as well, it was always like there's this underpinning, which is what you're talking about, this underpinning, that there are these human patterns that we follow. Like you said, it's like a code. And that the code is written, but it's not written in stone.
Right.
And when you look at the mythology, which I loved, there was always the dark tale, and there was somebody evolving from that dark tale. There was always a place of what I call pivotal point and choice point. Something comes up, it's a pivotal moment. But the moment to choose, that's a different moment. And, even in Campbell's work, is, you get the moment where it's pivotal, but will you choose to take the journey?
Yep.
That underpinning, and I think that we, especially as we got into the 60s and 70s and even early 80s, this idea of the dominance of DNA, I think damaged a lot of that. Because this is the way I am. I got it from my dad and I got it from my mom. And it's just, my grandfather was like this. And it's so disempowering. And what I loved about mythology and about the hero's journey and all those things was, is there some way to break the pattern?
Yep. Is there a great truth and is there a great untruth?
Right.
And can we reach a consciousness where I can listen to a piece of mythology and understand myth in a good way, great perspective, or myth in a bad way, story we tell ourselves that's not true, that holds us back. And I think that's the hardest thing for people in understanding mythology. They tend to be rather black or white about it when they say myth, whereas you and I think of it both ways. Yeah,
so the personal myth, we carry our own personal myths. The interesting thing about it, though, is also in mythology, this idea of the gods. So as a student of this, I'm going to, and particularly as a man who came from a very Christian background, talk to us about your understanding of the gods.
You mean the leaders? You mean the leaders? Because, and again, I'm not going to go Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory super geek here, but even the word God as we know it has a variety of meanings. I think that in Greek, now I mostly study Greek mythology, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and of course when you look at Campbell and you look at Wagner and all the other guys, they study a whole lot more than that.
Sure.
But for me, you know, when I look at that, it was a hierarchy,
Right.
and God's was a loose term to distinguish various levels of superpowers and super consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we do today.
Mm-hmm.
Where we call someone an executive, or we call someone an entrepreneur with a history of great exits. I mean, those are all various versions of gods, so to speak. So, and that's my view, you know, of that.
Yeah,
If we take it too literally, it gets all twisted, because then you can't learn any lessons, because your dogma will run over your karma.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I actually love that term, by the way. I mean, of course, in Germanic, God is good, right? Which is good.
Right.
It's as simple as
Right.
goodness.
Yeah, one
But
person referred to the gods as the betters.
Yeah.
So I get that. Yeah, betters than the, you know, Hercules was better than Chiron, but, you know, the distinction was small,
But
really.
the interesting thing about it for me is that a lot of people, you know, again, I see, because I studied, like you, I studied religions and I studied religious philosophy, and I traveled the world to study with all these different teachers from all these different backgrounds, Vedanta, you know, Hinduism, the Tao, Buddhism, Gnostic Christianity, Kabbalah, all those things. And even in mythology, I've noticed people go to, well, it's fate, it's God. There's the gods, whether it's Zeus, who's pissed off at somebody who, you know, throws a bolt of lightning at somebody, or whether it's, you know, whether it's God, who's got this big, you know, God who's the great accountant in the sky, who's got a book and is, you know, deciding what's good and bad and punishing you for that. And you, again, it's like the primacy of DNA. It's already predestined.
Mm-hmm.
How did you, particularly as a guy who came from that Catholic and Christian background, how did you, or maybe you didn't, I'm assuming, forgive me, how did you potentially get out of that mindset of my life is predestined, God has a plan for me and I have to follow that, or in a mythological sense that the God or gods may be pissed off at me or favoring me?
Yeah, so predetermination was a big discussion in our little independent premillennial fundamental Baptist church, and fortunately Brother Heck rejected it because he felt like it was an overreach of God giving us our choice so that we could demonstrate faith, right? So our independent thinking for the omnipotent, he believed that it was an overreach. So instead, he said God has a prescription for you. And as I studied Abraham Maslow later in life, I got what that meant. There is a being. There is a being that that God wants us to become. It may be particular to our situation, to our set of talents, to the personality types, you know, how we were made determines our being. So it's hard to say we were predetermined to be this type of person. So for me personally, the way it all kind of came together is one day, maybe 20 years ago, I was reading through something and I saw this scripture in Hebrews and it spoke to me. It was like my prescription. It says, provoke men and women to acts of love, especially as we gather together in public, especially during these, the most important days. That's a loose Tyndale version scripture. And I saw that, you know, Dov, and I said, that's me. You know, I was born and raised to provoke people to love each other, especially as we gather in public, because that's my thing. I get up, I give speeches, especially these times. I've always been called during the darkest of times, whether it was an economic recession or a personal tragedy, to be that guy that encouraged people to find the love message through it all, as opposed to finding the hate message. So that's a prescription, but it in no way predetermines what I'm supposed to become and be, and what my title should be, or what my accomplishments should be, or anything. So I feel very free within that prescription. I just feel like it gives me a direction more than puts me in a fence, right?
I absolutely love, I got to tell you, I just love that. Provoke people to love. I mean, you know, I've often said, if you know, like I don't have tattoos, I don't want a tattoo, but I often hear things like, that's a good tattoo. You know,
there you go, man. That's good. Yeah.
And what I like to say is I like to tattoo things on my brain. Right?
There you go.
I tattoo that on my brain. Provoke people to love. Especially when it feels like it's easier to slap them, when it's easier to bring them down, when it's easier to say something that's less than kind. You know, it's wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, and if you do that, the best way to measure if you're getting it right at work is if HR has called you 3 times in the last year and say, listen, you're a little handsy, you're a little friendly, you're a little familiar with people, you're not getting it right if you don't hear from them enough. So I'm telling you, I, especially in my work and experience, really provoke people to make real connections.
Yeah, I fully agree with that.
Right.
And it's what I wrote about in my last book about Fiercely Loyal. If you don't love your staff, if you don't love your team members, someone else will. It's the same as in relationship. Yeah. If you don't show enough love and affection to your partner, I wake up every morning and I go to sleep every night thanking my wife for being my wife. I am deeply, deeply grateful, and I don't ever want to forget it. And I look at her and I say, do you know how loved you are? And she go, yeah. And I go, good. That's good. It's good. You should know that.
Gratitude is a muscle, not a feeling. I was raised with that point of view. You got to work it out a bunch. You see people, their performance goes down at work and everybody says, well, he lost his drive or whatever. No, they lost their gratefulness. That whole, newlywed experience at work went away, usually because onboarding was broken, usually because the manager never bothered to develop a relationship because it was a performance culture. The newbie lost his or her gratitude and the performance went with it. So I think there's a link between gratitude, attitude and response behavior, and human effectiveness. And I think they're all just, if I was a guy that was going to draw right now, I'd show you, I think it's like a chain together.
I definitely think.
But it starts with gratitude.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a very important piece. Now, off air, you and I were speaking about being a mentor. And one of the things you speak about is being a more effective mentor. Yes. And I think that being a mentor is grossly misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And again, we come back to the mythology piece in that some people want to pedestalize a mentor. They want to deify them. They want to turn them into gods. And their word is absolutely.
Definitely was. Yeah, the human mentors definitely want us to make them a deity. That they certainly support that myth.
Well, many of them do. And I also find, as somebody who has mentored others, that I'm constantly bringing myself off that pedestal, constantly saying, listen, I'm teaching you from my screw-ups, not from my successes. I might be talking about my successes, but that journey was not from here to there. It was, it was like more like a heart monitor.
Yep, I think it's the leap from Greece to Hollywood that creates that personal myth in so many minds, right? So it's like from Karate Kid 1, I always say 1 versus 2, to Star Wars as an entire package. The wise old man, wise old woman, myth was created, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Reason number 1 is it feeds the desire to accumulate, right? So part of our natural DNA as a Western culture folks. I specify Western, is to accumulate things, to accumulate possessions, to accumulate relationships, most importantly, to accumulate wisdom, which is so far beyond knowledge. So it's like, Dov, the problem with that mythology, wise old man, wise old woman, is it creates such a high threshold, so few ever venture to mentor, right? And then when you do it with an attitude that I'm smarter than you are, which limits the relationship, right? So the wise old man, wise old woman is a mentorship limiting viewpoint. Instead, go back and do the fact check, and you find that that's not the way it was told in Greek mythology, right? Even if you go back to popular literature based on Greek mythologies like Homer's Odyssey, Mentor wasn't a wise old man. Mentor was a shapeshifter who saw an opportunity to help a hero. It was Athena who shapeshifts into Mentor and helps, the hero reunite with his father and, the kingdom, etc. And so it was because there was a need. And in this particular sense, the goddess Athena believed she had the gift, because that's what the mentor does. The mentor is a helpful guide that gives the hero the gift he or she needs for the next leg of the journey. And I emphasize leg. Within that whole statement, you find there's so many myths about mentorship.
Yeah.
And, so that's the first one. And here's why that's important.
Right.
Getting wonky, going Campbell. I sent you something. I hope you can include it. This is, I have to quote this right because Christopher's rather litigious. I'm kidding if you see this, Chris. Chris Vogler wrote a book called The Writer's Journey, Mythic Structure for Writers. It's a fantastic read. He has one of the best grasps of what mentorship really is for storytelling. Anywho, the word mentor, if you do etymology, has a lot of meanings and a lot of origins. Absolutely. It can be thought of as mental, as in, but my favorite one is the word menos. You know what menos means?
Menos, yes. there's mental, menos. Go ahead.
No, menos, if you go forward from Latin to early English, it means courage.
Means?
Courage.
Courage.
Courage, right?
Courage.
And you say, well, why so? Well, go back in real Greek mythology. Remember Chiron, goat boy Chiron? That was his role. He gave advice to various gods that solved various problems. One of his specialties was helping the gods not make huge mistakes because of their ego and overconfidence with humans, who could, team up on him and tie him down from time to time, right? So Chiron famously gave Hercules advice once, which angered his students so much. Hercules shot Chiron with a magic arrow. The pain was so excruciating, Chiron begged for death. He was Minos. And I'm telling you this because if I looked at my career and I looked at my inflection point, it wasn't when I went to work for Cuban. That was just putting me in the right environment. There were times of great change in the years 1998, 1999. I worked mostly with retail executives trying to grasp this thing called e-commerce. And in all that fear and all that suffering, I had an opportunity as an account executive to mentor CEOs of great brands from the Limited to Neiman Marcus. And that requires Minos. Because when you're sitting across the table from someone that's 20, 30, 40 years your senior, but you've got knowledge, you think they're heroic for what they tried to do, serve communities, et cetera, and you give them the gift and you show the courage and you're willing to take the arrow for it, you know what, Dov? You build some serious respect.
Yes.
You build a brand that you got to meet this kid, which was really what caused my ascent at Yahoo to become CSO a few years later. So, by having the courage to mentor, but not having overconfidence, by having the drive to understand more, to be in an opportunity to mentor more often, that's really what helped me become a success story, at least in that part of the World Wide Web's development.
Courage, it's interesting because in mythology and certainly even in Campbell's work, the mentor, the wise one, is often the one who gives the courage, gives the gift of courage.
Mm-hmm. Can't give what you don't have, though.
No, but absolutely. But it's interesting because there's this moment where the potential hero has, as I said, this pivotal moment, and usually in that story, and it's true for, I think it's true. The reason I love it is because it speaks to humanity. Is because in that moment, I mean, you can quite literally need a diaper. It can feel pretty damn scary to leave behind the familiar and move. And of course, in movies and things, it's this moment you share that, you're okay, and you step into the courage, somebody gives you the courage, and then it all changes. But that's actually not how it works. Right. And I've talked a lot to people that I've mentored about, as you're in the familiar coming from the Latin familiar, as you well know, meaning family. So you come from this what you know background, and then you get this moment of, as you said, of inflection, this moment of this pivotal moment, and it's so easy to go back to the familiar, even though you may not like it, even though you may hate it, even though you may know that there's something better for you. And then to step into, quote, courage or faith to go the other path. But what I always say to people is that's the most difficult piece. The most difficult piece is because there is no sign there. You are simply going, I know it's different. My clients have gone away. The customer base has gone away. I don't have the recommendations I did before. I don't have the regular money coming in anymore. Oh my God, they're going to take away my house. My kids are going to starve to death. I won't be able to pay for my kids to go to college. And I think it gets increasingly more real as the further you get away.
That's right.
Help our listeners, our viewers, to go through that piece. That's a vital piece.
You're making me want to boot PowerPoint and show what I call the roller coaster of regret, but I'm not going to do it because this Skype is going perfect, right? But let me paint you a picture, a mental picture. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr./General Coverdale in the United Kingdom. He wrote a lot about change management in the 1970s, but he had this analogy he used called the roller coaster of change. Yeah. And so what Coverdale talked about is that when change first happens, most of us go through shock, because disruption means the way things work no longer work. That's when someone is disruptive. That's when a startup disrupts a market. It just means the legacy folks start seeing performance issues, and they're usually shocked. They can't believe it. They think it's a fad. And then if it keeps going on, at some point, they start to deny that it's really real, right? So sort of like Blockbus said, oh, Netflix just has a special deal with the post office. Just wait till it expires, right? Just like the taxi cab company said, you know what, no one really wants to book a taxi on, they want to hail one on the street. So they kind of deny it as long as they can. And then what happens is it keeps on disrupting, and now they're bleeding, and they start to hate the new, and they resent it, and they become angry about it, and they get to the bottom of the roller coaster and they go, oh my God, we're going to die. And then, Dov, and only then do they start exploring what this all means and trying to gather perspective. Because, and here's the punchline, viewers, courage comes from insights. Every story where someone gets courage and insight was delivered to them, and the way they gathered courage by is embarking on a journey of exploration. Anywho, you're in the bottom of the roller coaster. You finally decide to explore. Then you begin to experiment with it. You realize, yep, this is the new way. And then you start to identify with it, but it's too late for 90% of you, because everything happened when you were in the bottom of the trough. Blockbuster still shuts its doors no matter the fact that it launches its Netflix Me Too. Here's the message, and this is what Coverdale said. When you face great change, make the leap from fear to curiosity. Directly over that roller coaster. You save incredible time by doing that, because as you gather insights, you will gather courage. Let me illustrate. So I have a friend who lived with us a few years ago because he, as a young man in his 20s, came down with Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer. Wow. And I personally took him to chemotherapy. My wife, Jacqueline, took him on several occasions. He had to have a lot of courage. It's really hard to go in there, especially when the doctor says, I'm going to hit you really hard because I think you can take it. Mm-hmm. And so he's scared. And it's not something I generally reveal in conversation because I find it to be very private with me, but I'll say it to illustrate this. I gave him some courage because I gave him an insight that I too had gone through it. And I gave him an insight that while it was horrible at the time, within a few days I always felt better. And later I developed an attitude that I could beat anything, which is something that he didn't have at the time. And those gave him insights. And he and I were laughing as we checked him in to do his chemo that day. And the reason why is because that's what he needed. He didn't just need me to tell him everything was going to be okay because that's what he wants to hear. He didn't need me to divert his attention to something else or to promise to do something for him. He just needed an insight. He needed a piece of information, and that piece of information says, I've been through it. You're going to go through it. Here's what's going to happen. It didn't sound that bad. He faced the worst case. And I believe, and it gets to the punchline here, the reason I've become so willing and courageous to mentor people 50 clicks above me is because I've gained so many insights. So for me, the moment of separation in my career wasn't the mentorship. It was the deep curiosity that led to a voracious appetite for insights, to where I developed the ability to understand very complex things and then explain them very simply to people. That's what gave me courage. So courage is not a spiritual thing. Courage comes from the hard work to prepare the mind. Yeah. Either you give someone courage, or a person, as I've tried to do, gathers my own courage through studentship.
Yeah, one of the things that you and I have deeply in common is one of the words that, again, is tattooed on my heart is the word curiosity. Mm-hmm. I think that the moment I don't think I know for myself, the moment I've lost curiosity, I'm dead. I'm dead in the water. It doesn't matter what it is. I did a video about a year and a half ago where I talked about why people stop loving their partner. And I said, I've been with my wife 20 years. I still have so much to discover. And I ask every single day. Yeah. I can assume a million things after 20 years. And I love to throw a wrench in her works too. And she'll go, you can eat that? And I go, yeah. And she'll go, but you don't eat that. I know. But it's part of that staying. I mean, it's like I say to people I use the analogy of falling in love, and I think it's an appropriate one, because when you're falling in love, you're just like, oh, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. Oh, really? Oh, wow, tell me. Oh, I'm so fascinated by that.
That's right.
But then you're 20 years or 10 years or 5 years or 2 years into the relationship, and you're going, yeah, whatever. I know he likes this. I know she doesn't like that. Whatever it is. That curiosity about your career, that curiosity about your team players, the people in your executive board, the people you manage, the people you take care of, your customers, that level of curiosity is what makes us in love. That's what makes people endear to us. And that is, I think, as a great even coach, but certainly as a mentor, one of the things I'm constantly doing is inspiring people to be curious.
That's right.
What don't you know about this yet?
Yep.
What have you
edge level curiosity? That's what I always advocate. Be curious about everything adjacent to the thing that matters most, and you will consume the world.
So
right?
you've done this great thing. You talk about the mentorship cycle, which follows 3 steps. Walk us through that mentorship cycle, because I think this is important for so many people who have too much ego to say, I need mentorship.
Yep.
Or they have too much ego to say, I'm willing to mentor.
Yep. And I love to talk about this in all fairness, though I have to give much credit to a mentor of mine, Stanley Marcus Jr., son of the founder of Neiman Marcus, who shared this with me as he mentored me. He was so good at mentorship. He not only gave me a gift for the next leg of my journey, he told me how to do it for other people. So he really gave me this gift. Anyway, think of it as a virtuous cycle. Step number 1, identify the worthy hero. Very important point to the process. You pick your mentees. It's not a program out of HR. You don't wait for them to pick you, because honestly, those are opportunists that just think getting a mentor is a shortcut to success. You spend your life looking out on the playing field, and you see that person with heroic qualities, whatever that means to you, aligned values, an outsized ambition, a heart of compassion that you admire. You see those qualities. The person is in motion. Every story has motion. Every hero's going somewhere. But what you see is that little deficit. Like if he only understood this piece of the puzzle, he could go so much further, right? So Luke, for example, didn't know how to trust himself. In Star Wars, Yoda taught him that. He saw that as a problem with Luke when he refused the call, just to get, Star Warsy in here. So the first thing you do is you look for the hero you think you can give a gift to, and that gift is knowledge. That is exactly what Mr. Marcus did for me, working at broadcast.com in Dallas, post-IPO, about to go to Yahoo. He was the master of CRM. We had a quick conversation when I was producing a thing for Neiman Marcus. He saw that I had very little knowledge about real CRM from a nuts and bolts standpoint. So he identified that. The second step is, after you find the hero you think you can help, is to engage very mindfully. So mentorship isn't like, hey, Dov, I'm going to mentor you, and then I just rattle off my life story and you are to take away from that whatever you will. That is not mentorship. That's weird, and that's what we think it is. No, not at all. You have to say the objective for this mentorship program is for you to learn a particular thing that I understand, and I'm going to transfer that knowledge to you. It's going to be very fungible to you. You're going to really know how to use that. I'm going to encourage you, hopefully, to learn, because the mentor takes pleasure and gets reward from the student learning. That's what it's all about, right? So when Mr. Marcus engaged me, he was very, very specific, saying, I think I can show you how CRM is going to make a difference when you go to Yahoo. It's going to be a big deal. And I'm going to walk you through the history. I'm going to walk you through the core technologies, walk you through the ongoing human behavior that drives CRM, and then tell you what I think is going to happen next. And he would give me assignments. He would hold me accountable. He would expect me to read what we talked about, expect me to make that phone call and follow up. I really felt like he would fire me as a mentee if I didn't stay on path with him, because he really wanted me to learn, and he valued his time, and that's important. Yes. The mentor engages with a sense of self-respect, at the same time humility, right? So step 2, you engage with the curriculum. Here's the cool one. This is the twist. Step 3 is to empower. Mentorship's not about being smarter than the student. Oftentimes they aren't. I mean, tell me that Luke, at the end of the day, is not brilliant at war fighting to the point that neither of his mentors could have done in that moment of battle, right? So every story, when you think about it, it really wasn't about one was smarter than the other. No. Usually one just possessed that gift, right? So you empower the mentee, and you empower the mentee by letting them give back in the moment. Because let me tell you about reciprocity. You go love on somebody like that in mentorship and you teach them and you teach them. If you pick the right person who's going somewhere a little bit too fast, guess what, Dov? They've got some serious updates for you.
Yes.
So when we get to the dessert part, of our little lunches of Mr. Marcus, he'd get his little notebook out and his pen and put his glasses on. He'd start peppering me with questions about the stuff he's reading about the World Wide Web. Like, what's this multicasting thing? Seth Godin's permission marketing, explain email marketing to me. And out of a sense of gratitude, I would rattle off 100 miles an hour, books I've read, studies I've read, things I was going to send him. He would take notes. Finally, it occurred to me, I'm like, wait a minute, Mr. Marcus, we're spending all this time with me teaching you, which is an honor, but you have 40 years experience. Why are we doing that? And he says, if you let the student teach you, you will never get dumber in the act of making others smarter. He says, this is my great refresh campaign. I mean, he was in his 80s, just as vital in any discussion of technology and current events as a person in his 40s. And now I know why. So that's why for me, all the great learning programs I could ever embark on, and there's many, I read a lot of books, I take online courses, there is nothing that informs me more by mentoring young heroes where I think I can help and I'm willing to empower them. That is the process of mentorship I advocate for people.
I just love that. And because one of the things that, and I do want to touch on this, but one of the things that I when I work with leaders, I say to them, you have to understand the world of mentoring in the way those of us who are baby boomers learned it was, I'm older than you, I'm more esteemed than you in my title, therefore I mentor you. And I said, listen, millennials are not going to have that, and I fully support them. That is crazy. Mentorship has to go from top down, from down up, from side to side. Millennials love that. And listen, I have not met a millennial yet who couldn't teach me a lot of stuff that I really needed.
Absolutely.
And I love that quote that you just said, which is, you never get dumber by making somebody else smarter. That is golden. And I think that we, in my generation, it's knowledge was power, and you held it close to your heart. You kept it locked in your safe, and you doled out little pieces of it to show yourself, show how great you were. Now, I do a lot of work with next-gen businesses, so these are multi-generational family businesses, and it's one of the great challenges is getting that present-time leader to let go of the grip and pass it on. And actually move into the mentor role because they're so strongly identified with being the leader. How do you get them, in your case, how do you get them to grasp that there's an even greater power in being the mentor than there is in being the functional leader, that time is now time to pass the baton?
Well, we didn't talk about that question, and I love that question because I've been researching a bunch in the last few weeks. This guy, let me get this up here. Can you see it?
Not yet. Toward a Psychology of Being. Hey, Maslow. Okay, yeah. Okay.
So I've been researching a bunch with Maslow, and I've always been interested in his theory of motivation, less so peak experience, more the theory of unmet needs, right, and how they drive us. And because I've done a lot of companion work with Dr. Covey's abundance scarcity, continuum, the other day I had this vision, Dov, and I thought about what I call a hierarchy of professional motivation, right? And I see that there's two different personality types that have two different hierarchies of professional motivation, but they both have the base one is reward.
Yes.
So the reward has to sustain me. I have to feel like the reward is fair. Once that need is met, then I care about job security. A millennial may care more about job continuity, but let's just call it job security. That's a next level of need that we have, right? And then as you move up the ladder, the next thing we want to do is be respected. A millennial may want to belong, but there's a respect and belonging set of needs, okay? And then after that, there's actually another realm, and the realm goes to legacy, or in the case of the millennial, meaning. So what happens oftentimes is that leaders as he writes about this, Maslow does, we quit at certain levels. Like there's people that just quit on love. You talked about this earlier. We give up on that because we're so beat down. We become hopeless about overcoming the need. It no longer becomes a need. It just becomes our reality, our crappy reality that we live in, right? I think a lot of leaders give up on legacy and they get stuck in the world of respect and everything else seems to be fine. And they're like, listen, and they say crazy stuff like, I'd rather be respected than loved. I'd rather be feared than liked. That is a person who is not angling for legacy or meaning. So we need to coach that leader that there is something greater that they can accomplish besides accumulation. There is something more meaningful they can accomplish before they retire than being highly respected. I don't want to be highly respected. I want to have a bunch of progeny out in the world that carry on the values that were given to me by great people. So I think that's our coaching challenge. And to make a pitch for a buddy's book, The Coaching Habit, Michael Bungray Stainer, it's a fantastic book, The Coaching Habit. It's about the questions that we ask that create provocative conversations that lead to self-reflection. Like, if I had a leader that wouldn't let go of the grit, I'm going to tell you he's stuck in my professional hierarchy in respect, and he's quite content with it. I got to get him not content with it. And I'm not going to, I mean, you know, Tom Peters used to be like, you know, what's on your gravestone? Like, at least you didn't screw it up, right? And I like that. But I like to ask people questions about when you were a kid and you wanted to be something when you grew up. What was it? And they'll always talk about somebody that was in service, more or less. Even the astronauts were explorers on part of humanity. They never said, well, I want to be this senior VP in an enterprise B2B sales thing, and everybody thinks I'm the bomb. No, they said, I want to be a policeman. I want to be a fireman and save lives. I ask people, go back. What happened, I say? Because you're not behaving like that.
Right.
You're behaving like a guy who's always aspired to be respected by your colleagues. And that was it.
Right.
And then the person's going to tell you, I'll tell you what happened. Usually it's one of two things, the ego or the lack of a coach. So they'll say things like, well, I used to let the information go. Remember, Dov, we helped that kid. We got that kid up and running. What did he do? He left and started that competitor. We had to refinance because that little kid, he took some of my best talent when he left. You hear those stories.
Yep,
and that's when the person gives up. You know, the ego will make that feel like that's happening half the time. But if you statistically analyze it like I do, because I'm a wonk, it doesn't happen 1 out of 50 times. People are good.
Yeah.
That was another Maslow's conclusions. People are wonderful, and they're full of all kinds of possibilities. And there are times they fail to reciprocate. There are times they take. There are times they kill, and those are driven by needs that are unmet. Absolutely. Which present tremendous coaching opportunities for us. So I love to go into organizations that are more hierarchical than semantical. And, you know, no one's letting go of the peanuts. It's all silos. It's all rice bowl, to use that phrase. And I just love to go have those like hard conversations with them about the kind of person they want to be, what they're thinking about now in this stage of their career. And you'll find that person who just needs that boost, and they'll start to let go. And when they do, they get addicted to it. I am addicted to mentorship and knowledge sharing because it works and because it's extremely rewarding.
So with you. In Campbell's work, and we certainly saw it in Star Wars, because I'm also a Star Wars geek, there's a point where Yoda has Luke go into the cave.
Right.
And Campbell talks about having to step into the darkest cave because that is where your treasure is.
Yep.
When somebody is at the level where they already have enormous success, you know, they have a $100 million, billion-dollar company, they have the Rolls-Royce, the Bentley, the, you know, whatever it might be, they have all the esteem of the world. Very often they're internally feeling like something is missing. But now there's this great internal battle between the identity of the accolades of the world and the internal desire of the soul. And invariably, this one is much more powerful, this desire to be seen and recognized in the identity. For you, what is it you can get them to shift? Because I know there are people watching this who are probably going, geez, these guys are talking about me. what is it you would say to somebody who's feeling that pull, but definitely the pull is stronger on the identity side?
Yeah, I mean, and I've had that opportunity, not Cuban, but other people I've worked with who were literally billionaires or literally entrepreneurs that had FU money, right? Those kind of people. And you wonder why they got out of bed every day, and you'd see them become lethargic. I have a friend here in Las Vegas. I was counseling on the same thing. Here's the point. Success is not a destination, because if it is, you're dead, right? Right? Success is a direction. The direction's forward. I love to ask people of any level of success, what is next for you? And I'm relentless. I'm like Columbo about what's next. I love the conversation about next. I love the conversation of where are you going from here? Because I can tell you there is no one that can tell me I am literally at the top of the mountain. There's nowhere to go but down. I've never heard that as a response, Dov. Most people are too afraid to ask that question. Most people buy into that personal myth that success is some stopping point that you visioned. I will be successful when I own this home and this car, and sometimes in less accumulative manners, when my kids are grown and have gone to college and have grandkids and they are financially secure, then I've made it. When you get there, you're still going to feel the itch. You may quit on it, but you'll still feel the itch. So that whole shift of what's next, I think, is the greatest coaching question we can ask a person who's feeling like they're done.
Yeah, but again, that stepping into that void is so challenging. It takes such enormous courage, and I think that you can't. I mean, maybe you can. I don't see how you can do it without a mentor. So even if you're at the top of your game and everybody's looking at you, I have mentors, I know you do, you know, we look at other people and we go, okay, listen, I know, I mean, I had a conversation with one of my mentors on Friday, and I said, listen, I want you to know something. What? And he goes, what? I go, I'm freaking brilliant at this piece. And he goes, okay. And I go, but I can't do it on me because I do not have objectivity in my own subjective reality. I don't.
Right.
If you asked me to do this for you, I could do it now in a flash and it'd blow your mind. But I can't do it for myself. And I think that that's part of the problem with that level of success is that sometimes you become so identified, so egoically driven that it's hard to admit I need guidance. Otherwise, I'm going to die saying he accumulated $100 million or he accumulated $1 billion. He accumulated a new wife every 10 years or whatever it was. And the byline is, and died with an empty heart or an empty soul. And it's like, damn, that's sad.
I think that's why it's so important for us to be willing to challenge people, and specifically to challenge insights that they hold dear that are wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to get a very successful person to begin to go into that cave, just take one of their corporate values that's wrong. I call them a pet founder value. Every company's got at least one or two values that should have been deleted 20 years ago because it was based on an anecdotal experience for one of the founders, right? I love to do this. So I take that CEO's founders values list, and I show how one of those insights is no longer valid. Because the world changes, sense of constraints changes, greatest hits changes, and it gets them thinking, especially if you can prescribe an alternative insight that's based on something real, that you can give them a prescription for deeper understanding. That's what I kind of did to kick the door open with some of the most successful people I had to encounter in my journey that did kind of look down and say, who are you? You're like one of those internet dudes. What do you know? I'm Barry Diller or whatever. Then you have to be very calm, very courageous, willing to take an arrow for it and find that insight. As they say in the Challenger sale, which I'm sure all sales leaders watching this have read, you got to find that moment you can point to and say you're wrong in a world of self-research and misguided learnings, right? So I think that's part of it, and that's definitely the first step, is to be willing to challenge, but it gets all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, Dov. You got to be curious. Sam Walton said curiosity didn't kill the cat, it killed the competition. You have to be a lifelong student. Stanley Marcus Jr. said, why do we quit studying when we get out of college when it's the time we need it the most? Yeah. I think it starts with insights, which leads to courage, which then offers you the opportunity to mentor wildly without any sense of fear.
So on that road, what's a problem or a challenge that you're currently working on in your own business?
Well, the next thing for me is my next book. I've written 5. And I have been grappling with the final construct for the long-awaited sequel to Love is a Killer app. So surprise, surprise, the next book is going to be 15 years later, my viewpoint on love in our career life. I've gone through some twists and turns. I'm down to 2 ideas. They're both highly compatible with each other, but they have different constructs, and my mind is constantly buffering, and it's going to settle with me very, very soon. But for me and my business, obviously, these book projects are key for platform development. So that's the thing I'm grappling with right now.
Very cool. Very cool. What is a belief that you had to overcome in order to reach the level of success you have? I mean, you and I met, I think, 8 years ago initially. You were already a top speaker. You'd already done a lot of the things that we talked about in the intro. What was a belief that you've had to overcome in order to reach the level of success that you've reached?
I have to say there's 2 different points. There's 2 different things I had to figure out, okay? Thing number 1 I had to figure out was that there was enough to go around. I was raised in such scarcity of stuff, scarcity of respect, and all those things. I really did believe that it was a competitive world we live in. If I were to develop a culture, it would always be a market culture focused on beating the competition. Right. I found myself, even when I was younger in my 30s, I competed when I should have collaborated. There was just a moment. I was sitting up in bed one night. It was Sunday night. I wrote about this on my blog. I was reading something. It was the 7 Habits, I think. And Covey gave me a challenge I rose to. And he said that the abundance mentality comes from a deep sense of self-worth where you believe there is enough to go around, enough to share. And I realized that it was an illusion based on my lack of confidence. And I just decided that day I was going to give it away. And I decided that day nice, smart people succeeded. And I decided to work on my technique. And I realized that you can have the abundance mentality and be a highly successful person if you live in continual improvement and only help heroes.
Fabulous.
So that's the first belief system. The second thing that happened toward like maybe 5-6 years later, and it was really, really important at the time, was that you don't have to have a title to be a leader. You don't have to have a credential to be a professional. You aren't accepted because of your resume. You are respected because of what you've brought to the world that makes the world a better place. And, maybe it's like reading, the histories of guys at the time that were exploding on the scene, like Steve Jobs when he came back and launched the iMac and turned Apple around, didn't finish himself. Et cetera, because I don't have a doctorate's degree. My history's okay, but it's like I've had a variety of big jobs and a variety of little jobs. So there's no credential, there's no degree, there's no like he founded this company that would give me the authority to stand on the stage, or as I did back in 2001, sit across a table from VIP people and tell them what was up. And that was really important. That's what a lot of people have to overcome if you want to be your own success story and reach your potential. You're not your credentials. You are your contributions.
Yes.
So read your fan mail. Open yourself up to the sunshine of positive feedback, because getting back to Maslow, that's what happens to a lot of people. The reason we give up is we think it doesn't matter. And the reason we think it doesn't matter is we think that we should be spending all of our time reading our criticism and giving our critics PhDs. So as I told one politician on a plane who was very down after losing the presidential election, read your fan mail when you get home. He says, I don't get any. I said, no, you got the wrong staff. You get it. You just don't see it because the staff doesn't think it's worth your time. And he went home and started to read his fan mail, and it changed his point of view. And you should too.
Yeah, I think that is so important. And part of, I've spoken about this many times, that part of the challenge with the Judeo-Christian system is this drilling in of the word humble. And that we're not allowed to actually enjoy our success. We're not allowed to actually say what's good. But you've got to recognize.
Yeah, humble's just about congruity, about like what you think is and what is. Right. The incongruity is the arrogance, right?
So the key is I've said for a long time, you think about the word celebrate, and when we celebrate, what do? We share with a lot of other people. And we actually celebrate our failure. We go, oh, I made a screw up, I ballsed it up, and we complain about it, and we talk to everybody about it. But when we succeed, because we've been indoctrinated with humble and not being too big for your boots, we go, oh, it's no big deal. And like, which one are you feeding? And I know in me, I'll own it, in me, it's way easier to feed the crap, to feed the rabid dog of self-doubt than it is to fill myself up with the self-confidence. And I am cautious of that. But it's vital that we get that. Vital.
Yeah. For years, I used to carry around this little seal that I cut out of a letter, a copy of a letter that the General Lattimore from the Army sent me after I spoke for the Army's Defensive Weapons Group. I was really scared if they would like me. I didn't have the credentials, and I went and we did a lot of work. We customized. They loved it. He wrote me this letter. I cut it out and I put that little seal in my wallet, and I take it out during those moments because we have that, in our business, right? Where you look at it out at an audience of highly successful people and you wonder, what in the world am I going to teach them? You got to get that little boost again, right? And so I had a gig a few years ago for the Central Intelligence Agency's National Leadership Day with their top people. Condi Rice is on the gig. I'm nervous. They're telling me they've never liked a civvy before. Well, that's scary. And so I'm standing backstage. And I took that little seal out of my wallet and I looked at it and it confronted me and it asked me, have you done as much work for this gig as you did for the Army? I said, yes, even more. Do you have insights that will really help them see the world differently? Do you have advice for them to make them better in the field starting tomorrow? I said, I do. And then it said, put it back in your wallet and go rock this crowd. And that's an exercise that I often prescribe to people. So don't be afraid to carry around those little mementos of success and eat them instead of fear right before you take the stage of life.
Fabulous. This has been an amazing, amazing show. I really have enjoyed it.
Thank you, man. I've been looking forward to this, dude.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to having you on. So please, we're out of time, and I've got another 150 questions and things that you and I could talk about. But please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you, the potential of bringing you in to speak or work with you in any of the resources that you have.
Absolutely. So I've set up a page that is timsanders.com/dove, D-O-V. So timsanders.com/dove. It's going to review some of the points we had today on mentorship, give you a couple of links to videos about this. I'll offer you a big excerpt from Love is a Killer app that Fast Company ran, and then you can, friend me on LinkedIn or get to know me. So timsanders.com/dove.
Fantastic.
D-O-V, no E. But I'll set up an E just in case Knuckleheads does that. We'll redirect that too. No, I'll take care of you, buddy. I cover you either way. Dove or Dove?
Dove. Pronounced D-A-W-V.
Like Von Charnay.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been really great. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And I want to thank all of you, viewers and listeners, for tuning in. Remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies can be somewhat counterintuitive, in that the fastest companies often hit a high point where they realize that they are spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing talent, but they are also an alarming rate of employee turnover. If you're sick of investing in training and developing talent only to have them leave you before there's a return on that investment, then please come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets of your organization. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there, because you can't outsource authenticity. Remember to stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, and you can get your Authentic Leadership Matrix self-assessment tool at $197 value, absolutely free for being viewer or listeners to this show. We want to thank you for tuning in today, and as always, I want to say to you, stay curious, my friends, stay curious about how you can stay open to mentoring and continuing to be mentored. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I am out.